You had a question.
Yeah. I'd like more information on the issue of naming and these movements in the 20th century, the relationship between justice and excellence.
Well, you see, I can change the entire political and social world. And so can anybody, if they have a mind just on one thing.
What's that?
And that is, give me the power to name things, and I can change anything in the political arena.
Just by changing its name.
Yes, because if you want to do something that's evil, and you know it's going to be profitable, give it a good name. If you want to destroy public education and make room for Christian schools and privatizing education, put forth a program called "We're not going to leave a child behind, no child left behind." Then people will believe you that that's your program. They won't read it and discover that it's a fraud, because to read it and then to believe that someone would be that audacious and that evil to do that causes too many people a kind of reflection which they're totally unused to. Clean Air Act. Clean Air Act from Bush is a dirty act, right? So therefore, if you put me in charge, I'll call it the No Child Left Behind, what it really is. Closing down public education so Christian schools and privatization can take place among our educated population. That's what I'll do. Better example. Better example. There are no terrorists.
There aren't?
There are no terrorists. And there's no war on terrorism.
What about our media?
That we don't have one. They pick up the language of the policymakers and use it. The media, to be free and to have any sense of justice, cannot accept the language that the government uses to disguise their tactics. Like, look here. What is this whole war on terrorism? Number one, America got a gift, a colossal gift, through a tragedy. With the Twin Towers demolition in New York, it was a terrible tragedy, but it was a gift.
How so?
Everybody was on our side. All the populations, all the governments were on our side. And you know what Bush did? Bush went to New York and said, we're not going to explore why this took place.
Yes, he did.
Now, why? Because if we really wanted to explore this and understand it, we would have to say, number one, you can't have a war on terrorism because they don't have a national grounds, they don't have territory, they don't have an army, they don't have an air force, they don't oppose as one nation is at war with another, therefore it's not a war. What it really was is a group of men got together to act in a criminal way against people, and they chose that symbol of Twin Towers. They're criminals, international criminals. Therefore, the gift is, we could have then created in the UN an international police force with jurisdiction over all sovereign nations to hunt down international criminals. By the way, international criminals are not just people who directed that that flight into the Twin Towers. There are also people who traffic in women, also drugs. There's a whole bunch of people that are international criminals. WHO, they're criminals.
Arms dealers?
Arms dealers. And therefore, that gave us an opportunity to say, look, we could go before the UN and say, look, we have been victims of an international set of criminals. Therefore, we need a police force, international police force, with a jurisdiction where it can go anywhere, the power to go anywhere, Now it's not a war on terrorism, is it?
That's something
It's
else.
not an excuse to conquer another country for their oil.
Right.
See, what is really important about so-called terrorism? Every one of the 19 of those terrorists, as they called them, I call them international criminals, they were all highly educated. Who were the people involved in Britain's latest terrorist? What was it? They were all educated doctors, all working for the National Health Service. Every one of the so-called terrorists that hit the Twin Towers was a graduate student. They're all graduate students. They're all university. This so-called terrorist movement is a moral movement. It's acting against the injustices that they perceive that has been going on against their people, and this is retaliation and revenge against what we've done to them. The reason Bush didn't want to explore the why is would have unveiled to the American public what we have been doing to them. That is, we've been acting unjustly. Therefore, this is a perfect example of language being used unfairly, unjustly, to disguise far more sinister plans, such as invading Iraq, Afghanistan. Didn't need to do any of those things. What we should have done is said, well, let us draw up a list of their objections. Let's bring those people together at a table, and let's see how we can correct the injustices. Do they object to the fact that all their oil is being stolen out from under them? Like there's this great scandal that just took place, that's just being unveiled. That daily, the BAE, which is a group of British and Dutch magnates and financiers, are siphoning off 600,000 barrels of oil every day to therefore gain an enormous profit of something like $1.5 trillion. It's an enormous scandal. It's all being hidden. It's all being covered up. Of course it is. Injustice always has to cover itself up. But what does that mean? That means that people are being deprived of the resources they have in their own lands for their own betterment and good.